If you don't know your history, learn your history, because I'm going to give it to you right now on the Savage Nation. That history is very interesting, and it's well documented. And it's the growth of the Muslim power in only 25 years. And if you look at the map, you'll see that they swept out of the Middle East, where it originated, covered all of Arabia, then Persia, then Egypt, and then on into other areas. They conquered Persia. They conquered Western Turkestan. They conquered the Chinese. They conquered Egypt. And who was doing the conquering? The very same types that are doing it now. They were filled with a fanatical belief in the sufficiency of a single book, the Quran. They burned the book copying industry at the Alexandria Library to the ground. They burned books to the ground, liberals. They burned every book on earth except one book. And then the tide of Muslim conquest poured along the north coast of Africa to the Straits of Gibraltar and Spain. Spain was invaded in 710. The Pyrenees Mountains were reached in 720. In 732, the fanatical Arabs advanced into the center of France, but then something happened. It was stopped for good at the Battle of Poitiers and thrust back as far as the Pyrenees again. And I can stop right there. It was only through war that they were stopped. And what happened after that is very interesting. Very interesting what happened after that. The intolerant self-sufficiency of the early days of faith, which made the Quran seem the only possible book, was dropped. Did you know that the Arab Muslims who are doing this around the globe are not even 9th century in their thinking, but they're 7th century in their thinking? They do not even reflect the 9th century view of Muslims. They reflect the 7th century view of Muslims. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? If you don't understand it, it's because you're a drug addict. You've been drugged in your schools. You've been drugged by your doctors. You've been drugged by virtually everything you've seen on television and everything produced by the wonderful geniuses in Hollywood. Now, a poll just came out. 60% say the U.S. is at war with Islamic terrorism. He doesn't know it, or he denies it. Hillary doesn't know it or denies it. John Kerry doesn't know it or denies it. Spokesmouths for the government don't know it or deny it. I guess the American people are stupid. The majority say that we're at war with radical Islam. Now, they look around, they see every day another bomb somewhere. Today, another one. Another hotel blown up. More people dragged out with blood running off their bodies. But, you know, we have to believe our leaders because they are smarter than we are. You have to understand that Barry from Honolulu is much smarter than you are. He's much smarter. He knows we're not at war with radical Islam, and he knows that it's not Islamic terrorism. These are just rogue individuals. They're lacking jobs and opportunities, and they're just striking out of desperation. They're just striking out because they need jobs, job training. That's the best he can come up with. Russia knows what it is. France knows what it is. Jordan knows what it is. Egypt knows what it is. India certainly knows what radical Islam is. But Barry from Hawaii doesn't know what it is. Now, you see, there's a dance of death in the West, and now actual death around the world, courtesy of the Islamo-fascists. Meanwhile, the Caesar in the White House entertains himself with 1,000 sycophants, partying on behind closed doors, as if the Islamo-fascist hand will not touch him. He thinks he's protected from this new plague, the Black Death of radical Islam. You see, we're facing something the West hasn't had to deal with since the wars of religion in the 16th and 17th centuries. When those religious wars ended in one place, they began in another. They lasted for over 100 years. The same thing is happening right now. The radical Muslims are on the warpath, and they are against everyone else. They are against Muslims who are not as fanatical. They are against the members of all other religions. They think they're going to take us back to some pristine religious period in human history that never actually occurred. This is a barbaric revolution, and we have a man in the White House who denies its existence. But whether he chooses to acknowledge it or not, it's going to continue until someone puts a stop to it. Why would any government bring in unvetted Muslim immigrants at a time like this? It would seem that only an insane prince would do this to this nation. But Obama is not insane. He's stoned. He's stoned on the orthodoxy of the progressive left. Obama and his supporters are drunk on their ideology. They think they're going to create a progressive utopia by continuing their attack on all Western values. Ladies and gentlemen of the savage nation, this is precisely how great civilizations of the past declined and eventually fell. They rejected the values that made them great and degenerated into narcissism and selfishness. They kept on partying until they were too weak to defend themselves. Then the unthinkable happened. They fell. That's the opening page to Government Zero. And what gives me chills is that the third paragraph of the first page came out before Paris and before Mali. And the sentence read, "Why would any government bring in unvetted Muslim immigrants at a time like this?" The dance of death continues. The dance of death continues, excerpted from my new book, Government Zero. They're Nazis in headscarves. This is a barbaric revolution. I can ask you a question. Do you agree with the majority of Americans who believe that the U.S. is at war with Islamic terrorism, despite what pie-face Hillary says, despite what Barry the Deranged says? Incidentally, majorities from both major parties said the U.S. is engaged in a conflict with radical Islam. It included 56% of Democrats, 70% of Republicans, 54% of independents. Did you know that? Did you know that most Americans understand what's going on? Did you understand finally that people get it, but that the leadership either doesn't get it or is playing for the other side or is in another universe altogether? Nobody knows how they can stay in office. But what can I say to you? This is a very dangerous time that we're living in. It's very difficult to not be agitated by it. It's very difficult, if you are conscious, to continue your life as you continued it as you ran it before Paris, when every day bombs are going off somewhere in the world, and every day the bombs are being detonated by radical Muslims, against Christians, against Buddhists, against Hindus, against agnostics, against Jews, against Hindus, wherever you turn. This is a repeat of history. Those of you who know your history are recognizing that we are repeating our history. How can you enjoy yourself at a time like this? When they're at war with us and we're not at war with them? And the lunatic running the show, nothing. He said they're like tourists. They shouted Allahu Akbar as they stormed the hotel. Majority of Americans say U.S. at war with Islamic terrorism. Meanwhile, they go on. They keep partying on. No, there's no Islamic there. There's no terrorism there. There's rogue people who are looking for jobs. Disaffected youth. Disenfranchised by the European societies that took them in and gave them a free ride. It's our fault when you think about it. Why, it was George Bush's war for oil that did this. These are the morons. These are the idiots. These are the college grads, the drug addicts who know nothing about the 1400-year war of radical Islam against the world. The idiot morons, the college girls, the college boys, running around with fingers in their mouths, running on the internet, running their minds on the internet, know nothing. And let me tell you something. A bomb, God forbid, that's planted somewhere in this country can ruin your day. No matter how progressive you are, it cannot distinguish between your progressive values and conservative values. They don't know. The bombs don't discriminate. They'll kill you too. And look at the morons, what they did in Paris. Look who they picked to bomb. They didn't bomb an anti-immigration protest, did they? They bombed progressive just like you. They bombed people at a rave just like you. They bombed people who got stoned and went to a dance just like you. Why did they do that? Why did they choose to shoot people sitting in a cafe? Or young people at a rave somewhere listening to stupid music? Why did they bomb them when they were on their side? I guarantee you 90% of the liberals who were injured or killed probably were on the same side as Hillary Clinton. Open the borders, they're not bad, this and that. Why did they choose them? Can you figure this out? Yeah, well, try to figure it out. I'll be right back.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
The Savage Nation is sponsored by Swiss America, the only company I trust with my financial future. Call 800-289-2646 or Swiss America. We have deranged lunatics running the asylum. It's like going into a psychiatric ward and finding out the psychiatrist is crazier than the patients. I mean, I'm sorry to be so harsh, but I'll give you an analogy that works in another direction for those of you who have nuance and are very sophisticated and find men like me and Donald Trump lacking nuance and sophistication, lacking a certain Vivaldi-esque speech pattern. Those of you who find me offensive because I sound like an old longshoreman from the docks of New York City, kind of like on the waterfront in the age of Marlon Brando, and sort of cast by Elia Kazan. For those of you who find my gravelly voice offensive, let me use my primitive logic. I'll do the best I can without the nuance that you are used to from the geniuses in the government media complex. Something that even you might understand, no matter how nuanced you are. Are you ready for it? Somebody gives you a dish of 100 M&Ms of various colors, and they tell you that only one of them, or two of them, that would be 1 or 2%, are toxic. But they don't tell you which one is toxic because they don't know, and there's no way to screen those M&Ms for the toxic compound. Well, there is a way. I mean, you'd have to analyze every M&M. You have to put every one of them through very rigorous chemical analysis. And in order to do that, you'd have to, first of all, not put the M&Ms in a dish to begin with. You would have to have screened all the M&Ms with very complicated, expensive analysis in order to know which ones might be toxic. Now, you know and I know what the analogy means. It means you don't eat any of those M&Ms. It means you don't let any Syrian refugees in because you cannot vet them. It's impossible. So what they're saying is, let's let 10,000 or 100,000 in, and if only 1 or 2% of them are bombers, we'll catch most of them, and if only a few of those get through, so what? That's the price of doing business. It goes back to the analogy that Karl Marx wrote, Obama's grandfather, Karl Marx, when he said, if you want to make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs. Now, that's what ISIS is practicing, by the way, the same crazed ideology as the communists. What did Karl Marx mean when he said, if you want to make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs? Blow up cafes, blow up stadiums, until eventually the scrambled egg is so weakened and frightened that it becomes an omelet that you control, that you made. George Soros is the omelet maker. Barack Obama is the chef. Hillary Clinton is a chef. But the omelet maker is actually people who are so deranged and have so many billions of dollars to spend that they are creating havoc across the globe for all of us to suffer through. Government zero, in other words, no borders, no language, no culture. I've been trying to warn you about this for 21 years. That's been my mantra. And when I started on the radio in 1994 and I said, people ask me, how do you define a nation? And I was forced to think about it when I first created the Paul Revere Society. Many of you in the Bay Area remember me. Remember the events I had, Saving the Real Private Ryan, 2,000 people, Name 'em and Shame 'em, Try 'em and Fry 'em. Remember those great events? So those were the progenitor events to the Tea Parties of today. And here we are now, 21 years later, of the same exact message. In the beginning, I was reviled and laughed at across America. They called me every name under the sun. People wanted nothing to do with me. And now they wake up and they say, holy God, we better secure our borders or God knows what might happen. And really, we need to do something about this Tower of Babel that's been created by our tolerance. And as far as culture goes, I didn't know what Savage meant by culture. I thought it was some kind of racism he was talking about. But by God, he's right. I don't really want to get on a prayer rug. I really don't want to pray to Mecca 6 times a day. We have our own culture, don't we? The culture I've hated my whole life, that Judeo-Christian stuff, and that primitive Bill of Rights put out by those old white men. Gee, maybe that culture wasn't so bad after all.